Now let us see another example for calculating the weighted average number of shares. There is one change or one addition here. There is a stock dividend that has been introduced, which is to an extent of 50% here, and this results in an increase of number of shares by 60,000 because this was a 50% stock dividend. So the original was 120, 50% of that would be 60,000. So it adds up. So how do you treat these stock dividends when we want to calculate the weighted average number of shares? We have earlier seen that when it is about stock dividends, the ownership actually doesn't change. And let's say for this case of 50% stock dividend, the original owners were 120,000 shares. These were the original owners, and these guys are issued additional 60,000 shares. So for every 2 share they are released one more additional share. So how do you treat this case? And also compare this with something like stock split, which is also essentially the same thing. So if there is a split of, let's say, 1:1, which we will say that, let's say, every 1 share will split into 2 shares. So earlier if you had 1 share, it will split into 2 shares. So how do you treat these kind of cases? So let us see how we can calculate the weighted average number of shares here. So we'll go back and create the same table as we did for the earlier cases. Date, the first date would be between 1st Jan and 31st of March. The second in column actually comes as number of shares outstanding. So this would be 100,000 here. I'll add another column, restatement. I'll discuss about restatement in a minute. What we also have when we calculate the weighted average number of shares is fraction, and then last is the contribution. So leaving apart the restatement for the time being, what is the fraction here? The fraction would be 3/12. So the contribution essentially is 100,000 multiplied by the fraction. So I'll leave these two columns for the timing. I'll come back to this in a moment. Let's continue with the others. 1st April till 31st of May, another 20,000 shares were issued, so the number of shares will be 120,000 here, and the fraction is basically 2/12. Then from 1st of June till 30th of September, the number of shares increases to 180,000, and the fraction is June, July, August and September, so this is 4/12. And likewise between 1st October and 31st of December, the outstanding shares would be 230,000, and the fraction is October, November, December. This is 3/12. So what do we understand by restatement here? This essentially means that all the shares which were issued prior to the stock dividend date, they must be restated so as to show the post stock dividend effect. This was 100 and this was 120. The 50% stock dividends were issued, so this needs to be multiplied by 1.5, and here also, because this is pre the stock dividend date, it needs to be multiplied by 1.5. However, after the dividend has been announced and issued, the effect will remain the same. So any shares, say for example shares which were issued here, they will not show any kind of a restatement. So here we need to just multiply it by 1.0, and between this date also it needs to be multiplied by 1.0. So essentially we are saying that all the shares which were prior to the dividend date, they need to be restated to an extent of the dividends that was announced. So that's why this is 1.5, so as to show the effect of 50% stock dividends. So what we will do now in order to calculate the contribution will be, so we'll multiply all these three. 100,000 multiplied by 1.5 multiplied by 3 divided by 12. So this comes out to be 150,000, and a quarter of 150,000, this would be 37,500. Likewise 120 multiplied by 1.5 multiplied by 2/12, so this would come out to be 30,000. 180,000 multiplied by 1.0 divided by 4/12, that is 1/3, so this is 60,000. And 230,000 multiplied by 1.0 multiplied by 3/12, so 1/4 of 230,000, so this should be 57500. So the overall total here comes out to be 185,000 common shares. So this is what you will use as a denominator called as weighted average number of shares. So please remember that this is the case which we have discussed with respect to the stock dividends, and if you find a case where there is a stock split, you'll also do the same thing as we have done, like the restatement and calculating the contribution by multiplying the restatement number with the outstanding and the fraction. So stock dividends and stock splits, both of them behave the same way in order to calculate the weighted average number of shares.